Good evening, little masters, and welcome to episode 381 of the Prancing Pony Podcast, where we're wrapping up season 9 of the Prancing Pony Podcast with a nice, cozy chat.
That's right. We're setting aside the appendices and heading back to the Shire. Folks, pull up a bench in the common room and join us. I'm James Tauber, the Sage of the South, and I'm here with the Man of the West, Alan Sisto.
Folks, later this week, Wētā Workshop, the creative force behind the visualization of so many of the places, things, and moments in Middle-earth that we love, will be releasing their first video game, Tales of the Shire.
Part of the cozy game genre, think farming, cooking, fishing, decorating your hobbit hole, and so on, Tales of the Shire looks to be our best chance to experience life as a hobbit. And today, we're sitting down with the game writer of Tales of the Shire to talk about the game.
That's right. Darren Ormandy is not only the lead writer for Tales of the Shire, he also leads the game studio's narrative team. He's been hard at work tackling the stories within the game, as well as the dialogue for all the characters, a huge task in a game that will revolve around friendships with all the other hobbits. He is Wētā Workshop's resident Tolkien lore expert, and that's not just a random title that we bestow upon him. He also happens to tutor courses on Tolkien at Oxford University, so he pretty much has my dream jobs. Folks, please welcome Darren Ormandy to the Common Room.
Hello to you both. Great to be here. It was funny. It sounded like hard work when you described it. I was thinking, oh, that's actually quite a lot of hard work, isn't it? It hasn't felt like it.
That's right. Don't undersell yourself. Make sure folks know you're really slaving away there.
No, I can't lie. It's been an absolute joy.
Oh, I can imagine. I was going to say hard work doesn't seem so hard when it's fun.
Exactly.
Anyway, let's go ahead and get this conversation started. Alan?
Yeah. Well, we do ask this first question of anybody who comes onto the Prancing Pony Podcast, and I'm sorry we can't give you an exception. What was your first experience with Tolkien's works, and what is it about Tolkien that always draws you back for more?
Ooh, that's a big answer. A short one about how I discovered Tolkien. I first came across Tolkien when I was 11 years old, a public speaking competition, and one of the people in the public speaking competition read a stretch of prose, and he read Gandalf's Fall in Moria, which was obviously a massive spoiler. But that was the first. I was sort of going, what's that story? It was a wizard and stuff like that. And it lodged in my mind as something it really piqued my curiosity. But when I was, a few years later, when I was 15, I lived in Devon, which is a very beautiful part of the West Country of England. And it was very beautiful. It was quite isolated. And I think I was having sort of mixed feelings about how I felt about living there. We'd moved from quite an urban setting. But it was the Shire. I mean, there were tiny rivers, there were tiny little fallen logs that you could cross. There were big moors with standing stones on top of them that sort of loomed down. And I just remembered one day thinking, Lord of the Rings. I read Lord of the Rings before The Hobbit. I thought, Lord of the Rings, I must try and read that. And I just very quickly picked up this tome of a book, and after about 10 pages, just started going, I really don't want this to end. And I read it as slowly as I could, basically. Somewhat at the cost of my exams at the time, actually, because I was supposed to be revising for my exams. And instead, I spent myself painstakingly rereading episodes from Lord of the Rings. But it completely changed my life, and it opened up the world that I lived in. I could literally feel like I was there. So it really did change so many things about me, I think. And it's remained a massive part of my life in a way that I could never have dreamt of. Feel very, very fortunate, very blessed that that's been the case. Because, and I'll give you a couple of examples. When I was in Oxford, first off, I used to work in Oxford years and years ago, and there was the census, the sort of once every 10-year census in Oxford. And I got a job going around knocking on people's doors and doing the census. There's one house I could never get an answer in. I was like going, I'll never get an answer in this place. I was literally doing the very last kind of, we've been these number of times, not replied, you're going to have to send your stuff through. And this old lady answered the door and she said, do come in. She was really polite. And she said, just wait in my study. And she said, I just need to finish getting changed. So she left me down there for about 10 minutes. Now, this was in the very early 90s. And she had a bookcase that looked somewhat similar to the ones I could see behind you two. It was crammed with Tolkien stuff, some of which I hadn't seen. And I just thought, wow, she's a major fan. I thought, this is really great. Yeah. So when she came downstairs, I said, I'm so sorry. I said, no, that's fine. It's actually, I'm really enjoying your collection of Tolkien. I'm a big fan myself. And she went, oh, he was my father. And it was
You were at
Priscilla
Priscilla's
Tolkien.
house.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness!
I know.
That's breathtaking.
Breathtaking isn't the word. And so and when I actually I think because I rocked on my heels, I kind of found myself looking around the place a bit more. And then on her mantelpiece, all those photographs you see from the biographies, all the family photographs and everything else like that. And I was so tongue-tied.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a moment in life I wish I could revisit, it is that one, because so much I could have asked her, and I couldn't think of anything to say except for, I'm so happy to meet you. And at the end of it, she was incredibly gracious, and she just said at the very end of it, as we were saying goodbye, said, it's such a pleasure to meet another enthusiast for my father's work. And I thought, how incredible, and this I think is characteristic of both his family and obviously Professor Tolkien himself, but just that modesty, that humility. Yes, because I found myself thinking to myself, I didn't say it, I thought, well, it's hardly niche. I mean, it's Lord Tolkien, it's Lord of the Rings. There's a lot of us out there, But she was absolutely wonderful, wonderful. So that's one of the times when Tolkien has come into my life in a completely unexpected way. Yeah, it's a lovely. I haven't shared that story very often, but I thought you guys might appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so glad you did. I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, and I think you got out more words than I would have. Comes to mind, and that's about it.
This is one of the children who, the Hobbit was written for. I mean, she would have been sitting on the floor while he told the story. I mean, how I wish I could have that conversation again.
Thinking of all the letters for Father Christmas and all of those.
I know, exactly. I mean, just the more you think about it, the more kind of anxiety, the more kind of anxious
so
it
much
makes
emotion just wells up in the idea.
Yeah. But that was a wonderful encounter, a wonderful experience. So
yeah.
But yes, I mean, it changed my life, as I say. And I mean, I think I've been very, very lucky. Tolkien's played a major part of my life. And I just think to be able to do that as part of what I do for a living is just such a privilege. And it's not just the power of the stories, which are remarkable. It's not just the depth of the created world, because, it is such to swap to another author, it is such a rabbit hole, isn't it? And I mean, when you find yourself poring over and getting delight from the histories of Middle Earth, you just think this stuff just never ends. And there's stuff that's still unpublished. There's still material that he wrote and the family have, and that I think sooner or later will be seen as such and even things like the letters, the re-edition of the collected letters. I mean, it's so wonderful, I mean, you just feel like you can feel like you're eavesdropping, sitting in the same room as the man himself,
Exactly. Sometimes it feels almost too personal. Like, was I supposed to know this? I mean,
yes, I know.
Some of the letters,
the letters to his sons are so incredible. Especially, I'm thinking of the ones that he wrote to Christopher after his wife passed away.
Yes,
when Edith had died, and he just his heart is just pouring out, and
my word,
I feel like I'm. Like, maybe I should walk away, like I shouldn't be reading these. They're so personal.
Exactly. I think what was so moving about that is he says, he sort of asks his children for permission to put Luthien on a headstone,
Yes.
And he sort of said, like, I think he's paraphrasing it somewhat, but it's sort of like, I sort of understand if you don't feel comfortable with me doing that, but it is something important to me. Obviously, he talks, there's beautiful quotes about her dancing in the field of hemlocks at Roos, But then what I think is very moving is that they obviously gave him permission to do that, or I'm sure it was far more affectionate than that.
Yeah.
And then when he died, they had Beren written next to him,
Yes.
Which I don't know or would have expected he ever would have asked for. No. So, so it's very, very sad and very moving. As you mentioned, I'm very fortunate to be able to tutor courses in Tolkien in the Oxford summer schools, and that's been great. Well, it's beyond great. It's such a privilege. And I take the students up there to Tolkien's grave, and it's I don't know if you've ever had a chance to go there in the cemetery. It's such an unassuming grave, It
is.
It's one of the small ones there, I think, for both of them.
Yeah, especially considering who they are.
Well, exactly, but it's just covered in so many beautiful little artifacts. People just leaving so many personal things,
Yeah.
Took a group of students up here. If any of them are listening, I hope they don't think I'm sort of betraying any confidences here, really. But we just stood around the grave and we just said, well, I just suggested that we just say something about what Tolkien means to us, And there was a lady from Iceland on my course. And I suppose she was in her early 30s, maybe late 20s, early 30s. And she was very goth. I mean, she just wore black the entire time. And on that particular day, she was in this really sort of elegant pink dress. I mean, it's beautiful, beautiful dress, which in itself was a bit of a surprise. And then we were just going around each time. She hadn't really said very much during the lessons and the sessions and stuff. And as we went around, she just started talking in Elvish by his graveside.
Oh, wow.
And it was just so powerful. And she had a really sort of, she had that Icelandic sort of accent and everything. It just sounded so powerful. And it was a really stunning moment, you know. And then afterwards, she shared about the fact that she was very lost as a teenager. She hadn't, like, she really had lots of problems and everything. And she said encountering Lord of the Rings and reading Lord of the Rings just completely transformed her life, you know. And now she's a mother and, you know, happily married and everything else like that. So it's wonderful. You can see how, you know, it goes far beyond being a set of entertaining stories. It goes far beyond being, you know, a tremendous creative imagination. It actually, there's some really fundamental things I think that Tolkien can give us in a world where, you know, we, like every era, we face lots of challenges, you know, and his messages of hope against despair, of fellowship, companionship, loyalty in the face of, you know, when we're often being encouraged to be selfish, or to not want to, or to look down or feel alienated from others and everything. I think there's a wonderful humanity that I think is just so powerful, you know. Yeah. I could talk a lot more about this, but I feel
I'm sure you will.
I was going to say we'll get into some more of that a little later on. But I did want to ask you, how did the whole teaching Tolkien at Oxford come about?
I used to create live events at the Tower of London. I was a manager there, putting together all the live historical events. So I had battering rams knocking down the gates at the Tower of London. I executed Anne Boleyn at the Tower of London. You know, it was another great job. It was a really great job.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to, at the time, I was sort of thinking I'd progress in that direction. I needed to do a master's degree to kind of get to, you know, because it's a very intellectual job. You know, you need a lot of research. I was doing the jobs, but I felt very strongly that I needed to get proper training. I looked at a bunch of master's courses, and then to my surprise, one came up at Oxford. It was just starting. I thought, I have no chance at all of getting this. I mean, I have fairly bad academic record as a, you know, until I'm 21, very, very middling, if not poor, you know, well below average, mainly because I was spending all my time reading Tolkien and not studying. So if you're out there,
called out here.
I wouldn't recommend doing what I do, but it does work out okay. Yeah, I was, so my academic record was terrible. I thought I'll never get in. But I just had a number of huge good fortunes. I ended up talking to one of I didn't know she was, and actually was one of the main professors on the course. And she thought it was brilliant that I was at the Tower of London creating historical events. She thought it was the most exciting thing ever. So I got an interview. And then in the interview, they were very kind to me in my interview. They asked me to kind of basically act out what I did for a living, just to see how quick I was on the historical details and everything else like that. So that was great, and I got in. To my astonishment, I got in to do a master's at Oxford. So I did that course, and I generally took the opportunity to, when they said, does anybody want to do a presentation, I generally speaking stood up and said, yes, I would. And at the end of it, they just said, it was literally the last day of my course. I was delivering my dissertation, and one of them, staff came up to me and said, oh, what are you doing tomorrow? And I mean, the honest answer to that is going to be, well, I'm going to be recovering from what I'm going to do tonight because I finished my master's. You know? But I went, nothing? Why? And I said, oh, there's been a problem. Somebody can't make it for a course tomorrow. Can you come in tomorrow and do a session on Shakespeare? Now, I used to be an actor. I used to be a professional actor in England. I worked at the Royal Shakespeare Company and did a lot of Shakespearean acting. That was what they were thinking of. They thought it might be really interesting to get somebody who's actually been an actor on a big stage to talk about Shakespeare. So I just did it. And then I got really good feedback. So they said, oh, actually, you did really well. Do you want to do a little bit more of this? And to be quite honest, at the time, I mean, this is a strange thing to admit, but really all I was thinking I was going to get from all of this was just one of those things about, you know, two truths and a lie. And say, I have taught at Oxford University. I thought, well, you know, I'm going to carry this away with me from this experience. But actually, it just sort of developed from there, really. They just kept asking me to come back. And you don't turn down an opportunity like that. And then a couple of years ago, they were launching a new course, and they made me the program director of the course. So I sort of run all the academic side and do a lot of the more sort of formal social activities at the thing, and it was at Merton College, which, yes, exactly, Merton College. So, as you guys obviously know, very, very connected with Professor Tolkien. So they wanted me to come and do my Shakespeare courses because that's what I was known for. And I just said, I can do that, and I can do this course. So I said, but I'd really like to teach a Tolkien course. And I thought, you know what, if I don't ask, I'll regret it forever.
Yeah,
right?
that's
so
true.
I'm just going to throw it out there, you know. And they went, yes, that would be fine. Yeah, I think that would go down very well. I was unbelievable. I thought, I'm teaching a course on Tolkien at Merton College. And I did. I taught a course on the first age.
On the first age.
Yeah, I really went into the whole kind of spread of the first age. And it was just really great fun. This is when that story I said about earlier, about visiting Tolkien's graveside. Those were the participants on that course. Yes, it was absolutely wonderful. And I mean, one of the sites which I actually didn't know about, but there's the Tolkien table in Merton College, right? And I wasn't actually aware of it, though. Now I am. I can see so many photographs of Tolkien in Merton are actually taken at that spot, because the college was saying he used to spend all his time there, you know. And I was like, oh well, that's so obviously it was a very important place. So I actually did my lesson on Beren and Luthien with the students sitting at the Tolkien table on a bright summer's day, and we just did the course. We did the whole session there, you know. I mean, what an absolutely marvelous privilege, you know. I was just, I find it very humbling, you know. It's when I say I don't feel I deserve it, I quite honestly don't think anybody could ever feel they deserve it.
That's the thing. And the minute you do, you know you don't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and then I was teaching Lord of the Rings last year. I taught a course on Lord of the Rings. Lovely time. I went to Sarehole Mill, actually.
Oh, yeah.
That was such a good place to go. I'm unashamedly plugging it because I actually thought it was going to be the worst field trip in the world, because I was just going to suburban Birmingham, you know. The whole point of it being, you know, like, if we know anything about it, we know that it's all been built over. I mean, that's like one of the key inspirations for Tolkien.
It's nothing like it was when he wrote the
exactly. But by sheer chance, that tiny corner is preserved. And I mean, not because of Tolkien, because the decision not to build in it was made, and Tolkien was still a young man probably, and the decision not to knock it down, because apparently there were a lot of mills there, but the decision not to knock it down was taken in, I don't know, the 50s or so. Certainly at no point where the mill's connection to the childhood of Tolkien would have had any real importance, but it's still there, and it's exactly the building that he would have known, you know. The cobbles that him and Hillary used to there, where you see the white ogre come bursting out of you know, I mean, and that's and it's a beautiful, and there's the woods there as well, you know, which are very evocative as well. So I was really surprised and delighted to go there. It's just it really is an oasis of beauty, and I think from returning to the Shire, or returning to the inspirations from the Shire, that's as close as you could get, you know. So I'm back in England again in a few months' time, and I'll be
good.
In fact, actually, when this podcast comes out, I'll be in England.
All right. Coming back to the projects you're working on here at Wētā. Wētā has, of course, been a part of the Tolkien collective consciousness now since their incredible work on the Jackson films. Hard to believe that was a quarter of a century ago. Since then, they've grown into becoming one of the lead creators of Middle-earth collectibles. I mean, I've got a number of the statues. I know a lot of our listeners collect their stuff as well. And now they're developing video games. How long have you been working with Wētā? And if you're able to tell us this, aside from writing for Tales of the Shire, what other work have you done with them?
I started here in 2020.
Okay.
Initially, I wasn't in the game studio. I was working for our Immersive Experiences division. They do some really incredible work, which creating giant figures. I mean, hyper-realistic giant figures. If you come to Wellington, there's an exhibition here called Scale of Our War, which is just remarkable. I mean, these figures are so realistic. You feel suddenly like you're a small child in front of, you know, it's very moving, very powerful, very successful. I think it was intended to run probably, I think, for like a year or something like that, 18 months when it was commissioned. And they've just renewed it again for about another 3 or 4 years. I mean, it's just one of the main attractions. So Immersive Experience, they do a lot of other stuff as well, but these giant figures are one of the things they do. So I was doing a lot of research and helping out with that division, and that was extremely good fun. But then word came out that they were looking for somebody to do who knew Tolkien, who might be interested in working on the game. And I went, well, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
again, it was another one of those, I don't think I'll get the job, but anyway, I'll come along, I mean, I love video games and I love Tolkien, so felt like it was very good. My job interview was it reminds me of our conversation here, actually. We just nerded out about Tolkien, ran way over. And then they said, yeah, he's got the job. So that was it then. I knew that I'd be spending the next few years of my life immersed in Tolkien's work. And when I wasn't at work, I'd go to Oxford and teach it. So, what a privilege.
And you get paid for these things.
I get paid for it as well. I know.
These things that all of us would be like, I'll just come do it. I mean, let me
well, I would have done, but I didn't want to tell them that because
no, you can't. Exactly. You don't want to give away your hand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So no, I can't do that. But it was a really terrific, what an incredible chance. So yeah, that's how I began. And a lot of initial work had already been done. A lot of decisions had been done at that point. The characters, by and large, had been, or many of the characters you see in the game had already been proposed. Their names put together and things like that, and some sort of ideas and outlines for them. And they were great. They were absolutely great. So I didn't see any need to change anything, really. It was all about developing. It was all about going, okay, great, this is a fantastic starting point. Now I need to develop these characters. Yeah. So my aspiration in Tales of the Shire has been to every character have a pretty good guess about who is talking to you by just reading what they're saying. They have a very distinctive way of speaking. I wanted them to be really individual. I spent time working out some of that story writing 101 stuff about what are their goals, what are their needs, what are their flaws,
Yeah.
What's their relationship with others and things like that. Doing a lot of time really trying to create that. And there were a couple of things that were very essential to how these characters are created. And one of them was that we should actually think they're real people, that they should actually feel like real personalities. And the other thing is that it should be joyful. It should be, it should just make you smile. When you're reading their stories. I mean, and there's a lot more to say about this in a way, which I'm happy to expand on. But that was basically my main aspiration when I came in. And also the stories will be led by character. Not the characters won't be there just to serve the story.
Character-driven story is supposed to be like a
very
plot-driven
much
story. Yeah.
Yes, exactly that. Yeah. I just thought this is what I need to really be focusing on because I just felt they were really important. And what every writer I think wants really, but I mean, I just really wanted people to feel like they were real and to actually start to feel an emotional connection. I can say, that obviously we've had people playing the game and testing the game and everything else like that. And it's really interesting. The different personality types have different favorite characters within Tales of the Shire. And that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted there's all these different types, and people just relate. Some people say, I don't know, I didn't like that one so much, Other people going, their story is just so good, And that's fantastic. You feel like you're kind of spreading it out there. I do feel the responsibility of it. I feel the responsibility of being able to bring things into this world, to extend the world that Professor Tolkien created, And, obviously the very familiar quote from the letter to Milton Waldman about that's in the forward of the Silmarillion editions, that I've deliberately left blank spaces on the map to be filled by other hands and minds wielding. And I feel that's what we're doing. I think this is what Wētā Workshop have done. I mean, when you look at how, as you mentioned, obviously the extraordinary work on Peter Jackson films, and I think my bestie, a great example of that is Theoden's breastplate, where it looked wonderful, but it was the same inside in a way you'd never see, and that's the kind of mindset that Wētā Workshop have. We don't go for the quick answer. We don't go for the quick result. What we do is we've got to get these things right. They've got to exceed our own lofty aspirations. We've got to be surprised at what we're able to do. And we see this through everything.
That's a great quote you just said, because there's something that Richard Taylor said in a recent video that talks about your expectations. I actually have that set aside in a question for us later, so I'll definitely come back to that. I love that.
All right.
That desire that Wētā has to, like you said, not take the easy answer, but to make the real thing, even if it's harder, even if some of it is never seen by anybody else, And it's in a way it echoes what Tolkien did with his work. He didn't intend that we would see all of these things that Christopher put together in the history of Middle Earth.
Right.
But that depth is what gave the published work that same feeling of reality that it seems like you all want to give us as well. So.
Yeah, very much so, very much so. And gaming, one of the things that as time's gone on, you change your mind about things develop in your mind. And I mean, I been giving interviews for Tales of the Shire at times for the last sort of year or so. And I was saying, of course, Tolkien would never have, I can't imagine him writing a video game or anything else like that. I've actually changed my mind about that. Because one of the things that I think is true of Tolkien is that he was really searching for the form that he could try and deliver his stories. He kind of, he understood. I mean, he was painfully aware of how out of time Lord of the Rings was. I mean, if anybody thinks nobody's going to enjoy a story, just remember what Tolkien was doing in the 1950s, a time of gritty social realism, the angry young man,
Yeah.
The time of all those realist dramas in film and, a real kind of post-war Marxist perspective in a lot of intellectual circles. And he writes the story of wizards and elves. You could not possibly have done anything more unfashionable.
Yeah.
And obviously he had a great difficulty getting it actually published. But one of the things that I think was really motivating him with this is he realized he got it right with Lord of the Rings. He realized that the framing of Lord of the Rings and the leaning into the first age material and the references there and the verisimilitude that gave it.
Yes.
It worked, it felt real. And I think he was always searching for a way to try and do the same with the Silmarillion. And it just, I mean, things like, the Lost Road, things like the idea of time travel, what is, how can I put this stuff around it in a sense that I'm not just going, this happened, then this happened, and this happened, and this happened, because he didn't feel he could do that. And of course, the irony is that's exactly what we did get in the end with Silmarillion, and it's it's like, and obviously it's not a quick read, and it's not
No.
You have to. I think about Silmarillion. It's like a dehydrated feast.
Yes.
That you have to sort of apply your imagination and your intellect to it, and it expands into something wonderful. But what you get on the page is something that is, you literally have to kind of invest in it. You have to put the effort in. But when you do, my word, the last time I was going to the Silmarillion, I was going, the trouble is I'm not sure I want to read Lord of the Rings anymore, because this is so good and so impactful. But I have, and I've really enjoyed it. So that was a worry that I didn't have to worry about. But I think he was constantly searching for the right form to be able to tell his stories. I came across something absolutely remarkable the other day that I didn't know existed, which was the recording he'd done. Now, having done an Anglo-Saxon course, I should probably be able to pronounce this better. I can never get the name right, but it's the Homecoming of Beartnot, I think it's how you describe it, Have you guys come across the audio recording of that?
I have, actually, a tiny little bit, yeah.
Yeah. And the beginning is an introduction by Christopher. And I was literally going, I was audiobooking. I thought, I'm doing some stuff, I'll listen to that. And Christopher Tolkien was talking away, and it was great. And then he started talking about, my father doing a full recording, doing it in his study, using a broken chair or using an old chair to make the sound of the creaking cart.
Yeah.
And I was going, hang on a minute, am I listening to this right? Is he going to play a bit of this? And he plays the whole lot. And it's Tolkien. Yeah. From what I don't think Tolkien had the technical skills to edit reel-to-reel tape recorders. So it's all done in one take. No, exactly. It's about, I don't know, it's a half an hour, 40 minutes long. And it's Tolkien going around his study, doing all these different voices.
Doing Foley and...
doing all the fine around his chair. And it sounds great,
Yep.
And I mean, it really is a treasure, I've said this to a few people. I said, you are a real gem. I said, you come across this. It's amazing. And it works, And I mean, there's that great story about when he first came across, we're so lucky that he got engaged with reel-to-reel tape recorders, because we now have these wonderful recordings of his voice and of him doing his poetry and what have you. But he was, he like, as I'm sure he kind of, for a joke, he sort of did a blessed the tape recording.
Yeah, like exorcism in High Gothic or something like that, right?
Exactly, yeah. Against his tape recorder. Exactly. But then when he did it, he sort of really got into it. And I believe, and I mean, this is something that, it's up for discussion really, but I honestly think that because he was constantly questing for that way, how do I create the medium to be able to tell these stories and make them work? He could see the potential that radio drama had. He could see how it complemented the imagination and where he as an author went. And he has an intellect and a brain that goes way beyond mine. I mean, and I think one of the things that's amazing about that is that what he then invested his time into doing is to doing his this Anglo-Saxon poem that he'd written, not diving into doing an excerpt from, taking it down to the the Eagle and Child in Oxford and pretending to be in the Prancing Pony or the Green Dragon or whatever. He actually went for that because he knew that was the piece of work that would work the best for what he wanted. I mean, his intellect was extraordinary, I think, and he really understood the limitations of that. So I think if he was here now and said, well, look, we can create a section of the Shire, you can go where you like, we can put in effectively anything you like. We can have stories there which you can choose to follow or not, or you can change the events or not. I think he would have been extremely excited by it. I mean, we're really talking about, now I'm sort of saying this is because Tolkien is now in his 30s or 40s, not, continuing to be with us now. But if he was sort of creating now, I think he'd find the opportunities for story that video games can give you, as well as the experiences of playing, then I think he would have been, at the very least, extremely interested in it and what we're trying to do.
That. I mean, you think back to some of the things that he said, expressing concern about what adaptations might look like. A lot of them were technologically based on the technological limitations of media at the time. Yeah, he was concerned that the problem with maybe making it a stage presentation is that you're going to it's a tertiary world now instead of a secondary world, and all you have to have is one failure, and boom, you're right back out into the primary world.
Yeah,
that's where Wētā comes in, and Peter Jackson, and you create this adaptation that doesn't have those failings, that uses technology in a way to bring you into the story and immerse yourself. And video games are perhaps the most immersive medium that you can have, because you're literally putting the viewer, in this case a player, into the story directly. And,
absolutely. And we've done so much work to really detail the world. I mean, so many little bits and bobs are there. One of the things I did was to create, I basically looked through the appendices. I mean, you guys have been going through the appendices, haven't you? So I went through the appendices, looking at the history of this region, from the return of the Númenóreans. Obviously Arnor, and then Arthedain, and it becomes the Three Kingdoms. And effectively using that and a general sort of understanding of landscape archaeology in the UK, just about basically how the landscape is used and reused and changes and what have you, and a little bit of military understanding as well, because it would have been a time, at least some sort of war footing, I mean, I kind of feel like in the case of as a parallel, the American Civil War, it'd be one of those kind of Kansas, Missouri kind of areas. No big battles, but lots of skirmishes and everything else like that. Right. Yeah, and so kind of put together a speculative history. So, and all this is background research. This is not something that we directly address in the game, but I had an idea of a grange beside Bywater Pool, roughly where Bywater Square is. That would be a farming grange, and that there'd be the hills with the different crops that would be on different hills. And because they're Númenórean, some very circular patterns, so that there was a big sort of enclosure that's a big circle. And then times change. That's in Arnorian times. But then after that, we then get into the times of of the kingdoms breaking apart, and then obviously the incursions from Angmar in the north. And I sort of looked around the landscape and thought, well, how would I defend this and stuff? So then started to build little. Okay, that's the biggest hill there. There'd be a fort up there, And so really sort of put it through these different stages, and sort of thought, okay, if there was a skirmish here, this is roughly where it would be. And so, have some sense of that. This is ancient archaeology. And then after that, then looking at the thing, okay, so now that time is gone. There's been a massive depopulation, but the dwarves are still in the Blue Mountains. And they need to keep the bridge open by the bridge up Bywater, still using the road, exactly. So they would also have a bit of an encampment around there. So delivered that to the team and said, okay, so this is why I'm thinking. And I mean, I suppose to qualify this a bit, there's a television program called Detectorists, which you may well not be aware of, but it's a British program by Mackenzie Crook, who's probably best known for being in Pirates of the Caribbean, but he's a very talented writer and thing, and it's a story of people doing metal detectoring, with the metal detectors. Yep. It's a very gentle British comedy, and it was one of the big influences on Tales of the Shire. I think British listeners will know Detectorists. So that idea of kind of having that kind of that slight depth literal depth of history, you know, and spoke to the art team, and then they got very excited about it as well. So there are occasionally you'll come across a ruin. If you look closely, you may well find, you know, a carving of the Badge of Arnor there in some of the stonework, you know.
It's also just very Tolkienian in and of itself, right? This idea of, you know, we mentioned before we started recording, we talked briefly, I think, about Dr. Drought and sort of his Old English and Beowulf. I'm going to use one of Dr. Drought's phrases, which is textual ruins. The idea that Tolkien sort of leaves these little bits and pieces that give us that depth, that reality of a lived-in world. And you're talking here about doing that in the game by reminding players that this hasn't always been the Shire that it is now. It was something else before, which is something that Tolkien specifically says in the book.
Yeah, right? So you're paraphrasing Gildor.
Yeah, exactly. It hasn't always been your Shire. It's not always going to be your Shire.
Be your Shire. I know, exactly. But one of the things that really struck me and moved me so much when I was reading it as a child was exactly that, was that sense of kind of going, like, the Shire, the land is still there, the hills are still there, but they're now empty. And I was living in a place where there was the most extraordinary, beautiful places. And it was, you know, there's a wonderful quote. I'm not going to be able to remember who actually the quote comes from, but they said that when I was a child, I read Lord of the Rings. I thought it was the greatest story ever told. It said, now I'm an adult and I'm reading it to my son, I realize it's the saddest story ever told.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that wash of sadness, of loss, is really important. It's one of the things that distinguishes Tolkien from other fantasy, many other fantasies, you know.
Yep.
The reason why I sort of mention that is I've also put in little moments of that, little moments of loss, little moments of into the character stories. So within Tales of the Shire, what you really need to do to really get to understand and know the other hobbits is they're hobbits. You need to cook them dinner. You need to cook them food, right?
They're hobbits, of course.
You make them hobbits, you know. So we had this big thing in the game about food is love. We go like, food is love. So if you want to make a friend, if you want to settle an argument, if you just want to basically be nice to somebody, cook them a meal. And, you know, the individualization I've been talking about has really gone down into their likes and dislikes for food and different things. So you kind of go, I'm going to bring over Rosy Cotton and I'm going to bring over Delphinium, and they're going to go and, you know, we're going to put them in a meal together. If you do that, you've got to find out, okay, well, what do they like and what they don't like? Because you'll get a lot further if you cook them something they like. If you cook them something they don't like, you probably may not do any good. And then you've got the whole business, okay, so what do I do? Well, you know, we've created your Hobbit hole in Bywater. Mm-hmm. There's loads of spin-off questions for this, and I'm sure you guys can come back to all this, but you know, we
already have. It's sort of like, well, there goes half our questions. That's all right.
And Bywater, you know, I mean, the thing about the inspiration, I think, for Bywater is just that thing about Tolkien's idea of filling in the blank spaces on the map. Obviously, we want something that's going to feel like a very authentic Hobbit experience. Hobbiton will be a wonderful place to do that. But obviously, then you're also, you obviously have to be very, very careful about what you're doing when it comes to creating those worlds, because Hobbiton is much more defined, you know, as a place with Bilbo and everything else like that. And also, we've set our story in the years immediately before Bilbo's birthday party. So it's after The Hobbit, right before we get to the unexpected party. We stay in that time. There's lots of good reasons for that. The main one is that we don't want to actually start hitting the events of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because, again, a lot of this is obviously about the player being able to express themselves and enjoy and follow whatever they want. We don't want to sort of go, well, you can't do that now because that's going to bang into the books. And so, you know, we wanted it to be a fairly blank canvas. So you sort of stay in this time scale. But you're in Bywater, you're in your Hobbit hole. There's, again, I think this leans a bit into what I was saying about loss. There was a really beloved old Hobbit called Old Ruby. It was her old Hobbit hole, and you're going to be taking it over. And I mean, the challenge for as a writer is going, okay, so you're a Hobbit. Somehow you don't really know how to garden, how to fish, how to forage for food. Like, why don't you know any of these things? You're a Hobbit,
hard.
you know.
And we want anymore.
No, exactly. Like, okay, so you're like, how is this possible? And kicked around different ideas for that because we wanted the learning process to be part of the player experience. We wanted to feel like you're being welcomed. So the answer is, gentlemen, I'm delighted to tell you, is that our Hobbit was working at the Prancing Pony in Bree.
Yay!
There you go. You can take
extra points for the prancing pony.
Exactly, yeah.
So they were friends with Bob and Nob, and they
exactly,
knew
yeah.
Bartleman.
Well, actually, probably a generation before, you see.
Yes,
that's true.
A little earlier.
There's all that time difference that we obviously don't get from the films, but the time difference between the unexpected party and the Gandalf discovering that it's the One Ring.
Years,
I mean,
the 17 years that go by in seconds in the film. Yeah.
So we kind of worked out that maybe those other guys, those other hobbits, were actually coming in as replacements, because our player had gone. And you can choose, there's a lot of customization about what you want your hobbit to look like, because we wanted to also we wanted players to really kind of feel what my ideal hobbit be. It might be, I want my hobbit to look exactly like a beloved character I've seen in an illustration or one of the films.
Right.
It might be I really want my hobbit to look really like me. Not me, I wouldn't recommend that, but I mean, I'd really want my hobbit to look like myself. So there's a lot of customization. You can really change what your hobbit looks like, and then you can choose their name. So I did a big deep dive through the appendices and got all of the hobbit surnames and all of the hobbit first names, looked through there. I'm trying to remember now, actually, whether I put them in. I did come up with a couple of, just trying to flesh things out a bit and kind of going, okay, so try to capture the spirit of it. But I didn't think in the end they went in anyway. So I think they're all the ones you'll find in the appendices. If you want to be,
Yeah, that's perfectly pedantic, by the way. I love that it's it's straight out of the source material as it should be.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've got, Middle-earth Enterprises, who Saul Zentz, the American film producer, with the incredible prescience to go to Tolkien in the 1971 or 1969 or something, and say, I'll give you this money for the rights to The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. I mean, one of the world's greatest investments, really. It took a while, but he got there.
Oh, yeah.
It means we've got the appendices. It means we've got all of that material that we can draw from, and that's wonderful. And the style is written in the style of The Hobbit rather than Lord of the Rings. And by that I mean that if you look at it, The Hobbit will say "you're" with an apostrophe, and Lord of the Rings will more often say "you are." So it's just a slightly more informal thing. We felt the Hobbit vibe was closer to what we wanted, a slightly more innocent vibe.
I'm thinking that's also going to be more successful with gamers who maybe aren't as familiar with Middle-earth. This could serve as a great introduction to Middle-earth for people. I mean, one thing that I don't even think we phrased this as a question, but maybe this will be a good question before we go into our first break. What this can look like as a point of entry for people. People come into Tolkien through so many different ways. I mean, in the late 1950s, you only came to Tolkien through the books. That was your only option. And over the years, it became, I first discovered Tolkien through the Ralph Bakshi film or through the BBC radio adaptation. And obviously huge numbers of people that came to the Lord of the Rings after seeing the Jackson films, some of them even after seeing the Jackson Hobbit films. And, some through Lord of the Rings Online when that came out in like 17, 18 years ago. So there will be people who come to Tolkien for the first time through Tales of the Shire. And
how wonderful.
What do you want those people to take away from the game that they can bring to their reading of the book when they first dive in?
The importance of fellowship, the joy of sharing a meal, the whole attitude of sort of forgiveness and redemption and everything else. I mean, we have an antagonist. We have Sandyman the Miller. I had a lot of fun writing Sandyman.
It's always fun to write the villain.
Oh, absolutely. And also I do allude to Ted Sandyman as well.
Okay.
He's only a little boy at the moment, but you never see him, but he keeps talking about my boy Ted. And he's an incredibly proud and doting father. And you can absolutely tell that his boy Ted is an absolute little... it's one of those parents who's got a monstrous child and they just go, he's so creative, I had a lot of fun with Sandyman and my boy Ted. But at the end of the day, there's if you follow the story through, there's reconciliation, there's warmth, there's affection there. And if you do actually spend your time to get to know Sandyman properly, which you have to do by cooking meals for Sandyman, and developing that relationship with him, each time you get to a certain level with a character, they'll share something about their life with you. Right. You also get some more tangible rewards for it. I haven't trusted that, the players will be going, that writer's so good. I'm so glad I put all that effort into hearing another story. However, I do get something as well. Thank you very much. Right. So we try and spread our bases there because, I suppose one of the things about Tales of the Shire, something we're really going for is something that's really inclusive. We want as many people as possible to enjoy this game and to relate to it, And so there are all different types of gamers. They're not all going to be people who want to immerse themselves in Lord of the Rings and live in that world. They're going to be gamers there who really love the challenge of playing the game, you know.
Right.
I'm not that sort of gamer, but we do want to create a game that's also going to appeal to them as well. So we make sure that we sort of prime reward players as equally as possible for the different player types that are going to be playing this game. Yeah, so if you do but you do get these stories and these insights. And when you get to there's three of them, 3 levels of them. And when you do get to the third one, I think for each character, there's something of a confidence that they share. And the 2 I was most pleased for were the writer was a character called Old Noakes, who is in fact, of course, a little character that pops up. So he's our fishing hobbit, and he's not really an antagonist, but I had so much fun writing him. He's really cantankerous. He's totally unreasonable, possibly insane. And he just spends his time kind of, but you develop a relationship with him. And then when you finally get his story, his final story, I don't want to put any spoilers in, but it was really drawn from the TCBS and Tolkien's friends who died in the First World War.
Yeah.
But I don't do it as directly as that, because I think that would be too obvious and also a little bit like manipulative. Like people don't like to feel like their emotions being manipulative. But I just wanted to give that sense of loss to this character,
Yeah.
And that was really important to me. And Sandyman, I was really pleased with what I came up with. Sandyman, he doesn't, give you any great insights as such, because I felt that would be out of character. But he's a great fun character, And in his kind of opposite number, the player is obviously our protagonist. Really, I mean, the player is obviously our point of view and everything, but obviously wanted somebody to do this. So when we came up with the story of are we actually going to have like a story here? And we came up with the idea of it had to be something that couldn't affect Lord of the Rings for a start, or like it could lean into the Hobbit, but not Lord of the Rings. We had to be something like it's the middle of the Shire. It couldn't be more middle if we tried. The Three Farthing Stone is like you can actually visit the Three Farthing Stone. We built it into the game, So it is right in the middle. If there's anywhere safe, it's got to be Bywater, and Hobbiton. So we're not going to have orcs. We're not going to have, they talk about times when the wolves crossed the frozen river and fell winter, but that's an old memory. So what is going to be? But at the same time, you pick up any book on storytelling, and it goes, well, to make a story interesting, there has to be conflict,
right?
You got to have conflict. So you kind of go, what's the conflict be? So we worked out, okay, so it's got to be something that is really important to the hobbits in Bywater, but is of no importance whatsoever to anybody about 2 miles down the road. They just go, are they upset about that? Why?
Well, that's what hobbits are by nature parochial. I mean, they are so very local focused. I mean, you think about Farmer Maggot and how he sort of looks askance, I knew it was going to all go wrong, Frodo, when you went to live in Hobbiton. And you've got Sam who's like, oh, folks out in the Buckland, those folks are queer out there. You're talking about like 20 miles away.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're still hobbits. But yeah, totally parochial. So that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Like, make it important to Bywater, but like Frogmorton shouldn't care one whit about whatever it is they're
exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So I actually discovered the story through a problem I was having, because we're trying to work out whether Bywater was a village or not, because it's not described as anything in particular. You kind of go, oh, it's a village. Hobbiton is, I think, by definition, a town, even though it's very small because of the ton in Hobbiton. And if you're dealing with Tolkien, you've got to know that his choice of words are generally
language means things. Yes, you're right.
Pretty
100%.
spot on, right? That's when we kind of went, got a great idea. How about that Bywater isn't a village, and the Bywater hobbits think they are, and then that becomes the narrative part of the experience of Tales of the Shire.
Okay,
which is that particularly Farmer Cotton. Farmer Cotton was just a great character. He's such a great character in the end of Lord of the Rings. He's not even mentioned before that.
Unsung hero. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he has that amazing Clint Eastwood moment where he's standing on his own, poking the brazier of a fire. It's like proper spaghetti western stuff. I sort of I've lightened him up a bit in this one. He's passionate about Bywater. He's fiercely proud of Bywater and fiercely proud that it's a village. And Sandyman doesn't want Bywater to be a village because he's Hobbiton Mill, and so Sandyman is dead against it. And so there's this whole story really where you try and work out, well, what do you need to become a village? What are the things you need to have? And I've had a lot of fun with that. I won't give anything away because obviously,
No.
we want people to play the game, discover it. But but I had a lot of fun with, it's not just a question of, well, you've got to have this number of things. I didn't want it to be a kind of, yes, you need to plant 14 trees and you need to, that could be good fun. And I think certain types of gamers find that quite rewarding, but obviously mindful of, we're working with Professor Tolkien's world, that we wanted something that was actually more of a story-based challenge. So you have a number of different challenges, some of them rather absurd, and to try and make Bywater a village. And so that was our main thread. So you discover, you've got various streams you can go down. So you have obviously that main story, which you can pursue. Some of that you need to get to a certain level of familiarity and friendship with some of the hobbits. So that's obviously the cooking mechanic is involved in that, but you can certainly pursue that narrative line. There's other stories that sit outside of that, which are just lovely little moments in the lives of these other hobbits. And then there's, as I say, the cooking and the making of shared meals and building up of recipes and saving recipes and everything else like that. And then beyond that, there's also exploring. So, I mean, within our game, and this can ultimately all return back to cooking, but within the game, you can fish. We've got some lovely fishing, quite rewarding fishing game going on there. Different types of fish you can catch in different places. We have foraging. So we felt that foraging, obviously for mushrooms, but for other things as well. I mean, we couldn't miss that one. But there's foraging as well. And there's a really beautiful foraging mechanic, which helps people forage. And then there's also growing. So you can grow. You've got Old Ruby's Hobbit Hole. You've got a fair bit of land, and as you go along, you actually can get more space for your garden. And it's really up to you about how you set up your garden. So if you want to turn it into more of a market garden, more of a kind of a small sort of allotment of growing your vegetables and stuff, you can do that. You can get different types of flower beds, and then you can plant different plants in there. Got to keep watering them, but then as long as you do that sort of basic thing, then you'll see them grow, and then you can harvest them. But you can put flowers in there. You can put all different things in there as well. You can really customize your whole gardening. We've got garden ornaments that you can get, sometimes through tails, sometimes you can effectively trade for them. So the garden is a completely customizable space, and it's lovely to see different players and how they customize their gardens. One of the things that I'm really looking forward to when the game launches is when we start to see screenshots of people's gardens and see how they've used what the amazing team here put together, as far as all the artists and designers have put together the different ideas and how people are starting to use those. You can do the same inside as well. So Old Ruby was an old hobbit, and she was getting a bit long in the tooth. So it's cozy but tatty, I think would be the way to describe it. You've got a good kitchen, always a very good start, but you can decorate it, basically decorating it any way you like. Some of the videos have been coming out have shown little examples of home decoration. But you can carpets, rugs, different colors, different textures, furniture, tables, bookcases, wallpaper, like window shapes, fireplace, but you can customize it and make it your own hobbit hole that you want to be in. I mean, Tales of the Shire sort of came out of the time of COVID. I mean, I started at Wētā Workshop during the COVID years. Obviously, here in New Zealand, we were in a bit of a strange situation because COVID didn't really affect us. We kept it away from us, but we were very aware of how it was affecting all our friends and families in other parts of the world. And then, of course, eventually, COVID did happen here as well. And so there was that feeling of wanting to be in a cozy, supportive environment where people look after each other. I live very close to where I am at the moment at work in Miramar in New Zealand. There's beaches all here. You could go out at certain times of day onto the beach in Wellington, and people were leaving messages to their friends on the beach in the sand as you walked around as a way to communicate with each other, send messages to people. And it was just very moving, and those sort of things that you see made us, I think, put us very much into the mindset that we wanted to create something that was a response to that, that really celebrated those simple things, because so often those things are so easily overlooked in life, and we don't celebrate the joy of a good meal together, the joy of developing a friendship, becoming closer friends with somebody. So we wanted to do that. So that's really why so much of what this is involved in is about relationships, and the driver for relationships is for cooking. We've got an extensive amount of menus to use. And then there's a really gorgeous feature, which, the decorating stuff is amazing. Decorations are very freehand. You can put them into all sorts of places, but you're not confined. You don't have to put you can only go in this slot here, can only go in that slot there. It's really free and open. The other thing that's really gorgeous is that when you go and say you grow some potatoes, which I'm sure you're going to do. I mean,
if you're going to do a Hobbit game, you have to grow potatoes,
really,
and you better have mechanics for me to be able to boil them or mash them, or put them in a
stew. Yeah, very good point. Yeah,
if you don't, there's going to be all sorts of heck to pay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I do. I do refer to them as taters in the game. Actually, I think in the recipes they might be as potatoes, but the hobbits refer to them as taters.
They're good ballast for an empty stomach. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but if you go and grow your potatoes and you don't cook with them immediately, you put them in your larder. When you go into your larder, you'll see them there. If you go and they're actually going to be there. And if you go and then you're growing carrots, if you're growing beans, if you go and forage and you collect a load of mushrooms. You collect these things, you put them in your pantry. When you go to your pantry, which is, as you would imagine for a hobbit, quite a sizable space. I mean, it's like a small room. But they're there. There's shelves all around there. And everything you start to collect, your pantry fills up with all of the things that you've done. So, and I think this is a really beautiful thing that feels really, it's very much part of the genre of game, but I think it's just so beautifully expressed because you're quite used to sort of having your inventory where you pull up your inventory and it says, okay, you have this and it's on a grid, right?
Right.
So this is effectively the same thing, but it's actually there in the world. You don't need to bring up the larder. You can it's actually there. It's a room of the house. You just walk round to it. If you want to see if you've got any potatoes, you can walk into the larder and have a look. And they actually fill up. So yeah.
It's definitely a distinction from other games in the genre. I mean, you're right. They're typically just inventory lists on a grid or, just a straight up list. So,
yeah. Well, I think that's, and that's obviously, it's a great way to do it. And it's, there's obviously, it can often free the space to do other things that the game wants to do. So certainly nothing wrong with that, but we just had that opportunity to do that. And I think it's just a really lovely addition. So.
It is. Well, folks, we will come right back and just continue this incredible chat right after the break. Now, we'll get back to our chat with Darren in just a minute, but we want to remind you there's a lot more talk going on at the Prancing Pony podcast than just us.
The PPP has an amazing listener community. They're always coming up with great questions and discussion across all our social media spaces. Check out our comment room on Facebook, our dedicated subreddit, Twitter, and more.
On Facebook, just look for the Prancing Pony podcast. Follow the page to get the news and episode drops, but you're going to want to join the group to get involved in some great discussions.
Or if you prefer Reddit, find us there at r/prancingponypod. On Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitch, TikTok, and YouTube, we're simply at Prancing Pony Pod.
That's right. And if you want daily Tolkien content, I mean, come on, who doesn't? Check out Today's Tolkien Times on the PPP YouTube channel and on all your favorite podcast apps. It's my short format daily show with everything from Middle-earth Map Monday to Silmarillion Saturday. And then there's my new twice-weekly streaming of all fun things Middle-earth on the PPP Plays, where I can guarantee you, folks, Tales of the Shire will be making its debut there very soon. Be sure to check both of them out on the YouTube channel for all the PPP productions at youtube.com/@prancingponypod. James, this has been already... I mean, it feels like we've been talking with Darren for like 20 minutes, and it's, we've been here for an hour. We've got like a gazillion questions. It's going to be an all-day episode. Nobody's going to complain. Why don't you go ahead and kick off with the next round of questions?
Yeah. So many of the places in Tolkien's Middle-earth were or seem to be inspired by places and histories in the primary world, and none more explicitly than the Shire. We've already touched on this. In letter 178, Tolkien wrote that the Shire is in fact more or less a Warwickshire village of about the period of the Diamond Jubilee. For listeners, he's referring
mostly
to
Americans.
to Queen Victoria's.
I had to look this up, right? I didn't know what this was.
To Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee, which took place in 1897. To what extent did you look at Tolkien's own life? I mean, you've touched on this already, but we can dive into it a little bit more. To what extent did you look at Tolkien's own life, not just the legendarium, to formulate what the Shire would look and feel like?
As far as like the actual look of the Shire goes, as I say, we've got a fantastic art team here who Kurt, who was doing a lot of the design of the landscapes, just had so many pictures around his desktop, kept changing pictures of the English landscape. He really managed to capture what the English landscape feels like, because we are in New Zealand, and in fact, it's very different flora and fauna here. There are a lot of British trees here, but that's because they were brought over to New Zealand. So they haven't grown in the same way as they have in England. And also the English countryside is in itself rather a sort of a historical document all of its own. I was saying before about sort of the deep history of the landscape. A lot of the time those sort of clumps of trees on top of hills have been there because farmers are trying to keep the soil on top of the hill, or they might be because there used to be an old hill fort there, and that there's the trees actually growing through the banks of an old hill fort. So a lot of care and attention was done into capturing the rolling hills of England, where and having trees that are British trees, English trees, and then also the places they would grow and everything. So it does have a lovely authenticity from that point of view. When it comes to the feel of the Shire, in some ways, of course, that's quite hard to define. There's certain things though that were very true on it. One of which is the fact that hobbits, everything's got a certain age to it in a sense, because hobbits won't go out of their way to like remake something or knock something down to rebuild it to make it a bit better.
Right.
Some of that is because they've got just a tremendous kind of empathy and connection to nature, and some of that is because they're lazy and they want to spend time in the pub. So
why do that when I can make a meal and have people over to eat? Right.
Exactly. Yes, this hobble is completely fine. And yes, it is very old, and but it works. And likewise, I think things like their clothing is clothing that's practical, hard wearing, possibly repaired, but not thrown away. I'm lucky enough to be of a generation that my grandmother's generation, more or less the same as Tolkien. Tolkien was a little bit older, maybe like about 20 years older, I suppose, than my grandmother. But it's still part of that world. So their values, those old values from my grandparents, and the way they spoke as well, and the way they talked, was really helpful. I drew a lot on that, to talk about that and to try and capture the way of expressing the types of words that we use. So many American phrases are now in our vocabulary now.
We apologize for that.
Well, I was about to say, actually, I don't think it's any bad thing. And I think if one of the things that when we were talking about, we were talking about the Tolkien letters earlier. One of the things I think Tolkien is mistaken for is the fact of going, and I mean, you can understand why. I mean, every time you see him, he's dressed up in a tweed suit, usually with a pipe in his mouth. He works in Oxford, which is visually quite literally Hogwarts. I mean, he actually seems to come from a different age, and he studies, he can speak about 8 languages that died out 1,000 years ago. Like this guy is like, he's not in any way, shape or form a modern human. And I mean, Humphrey Carpenter's biography said of him, he didn't enjoy any literature beyond Chaucer, I wonder whether that's true. I mean, we talk about, there's that wonderful documentary, Tolkien at Oxford, where they interview him in Merton College. Yeah. And at the end of it, he says, Lord of the Rings is about death, the inevitability of death, and he pulls out from his wallet the quote. And it's a quote from Simone de Beauvoir.
Yes.
It's not a quote from, he's pulled from Piers Plowman or Beowulf or something like that.
Right.
It's Simone de Beauvoir, right?
Yeah.
So I think the perception of him being out of time, we've talked about how surprising, like almost intimate, and one of the things I was lucky enough to do a while ago now was I went to, there was a bit of a residential school on Tolkien that was led by Stuart Lee, the Professor Stuart Lee, who's, is obviously a tremendous scholar of Old English and a very big Tolkien enthusiast. And there were very different people talking about it. One of the things they were talking about was the role of women in Tolkien's world. Of course, it's one of the topics that often comes up.
Yeah. And
there was a very interesting observation by some of the academics there that said that Tolkien was distinctive when you look at the records of the university, how many women he took on as a supervisor when they were doing their doctorates, their PhDs, and also how highly those women spoke of him. Said it was unusual for an Oxford professor in the 1930s or 40s to take on a woman student at that level to become a PhD. Obviously, it's a much less enlightened time then. And it was even more unusual that they would put effort into it, but he was very warmly regarded by his female students. So some of the ideas that we may think, these ideas we might have of him, I think aren't borne out by him. And I don't think it's because he obviously was just everything about him was really looking into living in the past in many ways, but it doesn't mean that he was a man who was dominated by living in the past, I don't think. I think he was far more he had far more humanity than I think people would expect. He's not an icon, you know.
No.
He's astonishingly brilliant and is a phenomena when it comes to anything created. I can't think of anybody who's done anything before or since Tolkien on the scale that he has. And so we've never even got to the bottom of everything he's created yet. Not all of it has been published. But I think underneath all that, he was a tremendous warmth for people.
Yeah.
You know, and a consideration for people. And he cared about people, you know. And I think that this tremendous humility. So he was, you know, I think if you met him, and I so wish I had at all, I'm very jealous of Christopher Lee, you know. I really wish I'd met him, but you know, I have met his daughter, and she had the same humility and kindness about her and generosity of spirit, you know. When you just know you're in the room with a really good person, I think would how I describe meeting Priscilla Tolkien. And, you know, and I feel I'd feel the same if I'd met the professor himself, you know. That is the quality that we're trying to get, one of kindness, you know, a kindness and a love. And that's not me being sentimental. It's really just trying to reach into what I think are the engines that drove Tolkien.
Yeah.
Like, we have the books and we have some astonishingly good interpretations of the work, you know, and even ones which people don't think are necessarily as good as interpretations, different radio plays or different film versions or whatever.
Right.
There's often things they've done in there which are still really interesting.
Exactly.
And bring, you know, it's wonderful to see so many different imaginations coming to work on Professor Tolkien's work. So we have all of that material, and we can look at all of that material and go and take our story from there. But I was also really interested in getting into, like, well, what was driving him, though? What did he want? So, so the creation of the Shire, the creation of the characters, the general feel and tone of it, I wanted it to feel like it belonged in the world of the Lord of the Rings. If all you knew about The Hobbit, if all you knew about Middle-earth was the bit that Tolkien wrote in the Shire, you'd have this, it would be a very peculiar story, really, but just for these sort of rather comical, you know, there's a certain kind of acerbic wit, maybe, or a slight kind of, and there is, as you say, that incredible parochialism, which can, you know, like make them suspicious of absolutely everybody.
Yeah, right. And there's gossip involved as well.
Gossip, very much gossip. Yes,
gossip,
exactly. Lots of gossip and everything else.
And there's
like
sort of a myopia that even Tolkien says Sam is, you know, deeply myopic in many things.
Yeah,
I think that's another trait that's relatively universal. I mean, I think we're led to see that Frodo, Merry, and Pippin are very extraordinary hobbits. That Sam is much more like the rest of them. Yeah,
but then of course he of all of them is the real hero of Lord of the Rings, you know,
hero of the story.
Yeah, exactly. I read Lord of the Rings to my daughter, my youngest daughter, a couple of years ago. She was 11, 12 years old. It was so wonderful to do that and go through the story. And I had to tell her that Gandalf comes back, because it had stopped being amazing immersive storytelling with, you know, tears being shed for the sadness of death of Gandalf. It sort of moved into the area of parental abuse that I was actually fooling her. She was distraught.
Yes.
Her favorite character for a long time, well, it still is actually Tom Bombadil, which I also found so interesting that without any of that baggage, that Bombadil just resonated with her so strongly, you know. He's one of the great conundrums of.
He's a very interesting conundrum. So, Darren, one of the things that good cozy games do well is use familiar everyday experiences to make gamers comfortable right away. I mean, food or friends are the things that come to mind right away based on what we've been talking about. For those of us who are fans of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, the Shire itself is a character. It is a familiar friend. And creating a world set in such a well-known place can put gamers at ease right away if it's done really well. If it doesn't feel right, it can do the exact opposite. So, you know, we've talked a lot about the things that you've done to make it successful, but what were the biggest challenges from your perspective as the writer in making sure that the Shire feels like that familiar friend for players?
One of it was what I alluded to before when I said about that your Hobbit had come from the prancing pony. It was like, well, how are you arriving there? You know, like, you're not going to spring out of the ground. I didn't want it to be
like a dwarf.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they tell me.
Yeah.
We actually have a very beautiful, it's like a small film clip, really, where you meet a certain well-known character from Lord of the Rings, and they actually meet you, and then they take you in, they bring you to Bywater. But as part of that, which I think is rather lovely, is that they basically find you can't see yourself, and they basically say, come and wake up. And then it goes into a character customization screen. So then you can go, okay, I'm going to be, this is what I'm going to be male, I'm going to be female, I'm going to be, this is my body type, this is my hair color, it's my skin color, how much hair I have on my feet. I think we might be the only game when foot hair customization is an option. I'm not sure it's our strongest selling point, but it's a good one.
I'm sure there's a mod for that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you do all of that, and then of course you give your name. And I said before that we use the
the
took all the names from the appendices, and then you're in the story as you design stuff, and the little film continues, but it is the you you've created. And that's rather beautiful. And you get brought into Bywater, and it's just a little bit of general scene setting. It sets, you understand where you are and who you are. Then you're in there. And then the first Hobbit you meet is Orlo Proudfoot.
Oh. He
probably is the character that, if you follow the progression narrative, has the biggest change in his life. So when you meet him, he's like the sort of, effectively he doesn't do very much. So he just busies himself helping people. And one of the things he does is deliver the post, and he's also meeting you and bringing you into Old Ruby's Hobbit Hall and welcoming you to Bywater. And that's how it begins. But very quickly, then you're down to the Green Dragon, and then you're
good.
Farmer Cotton and Sandyman are having an argument, and things kick off from there. That's how we bring people into the Shire. You very quickly do some cooking, but then when you're there, you then start to learn how to be a hobbit, how to forage, how to fish. And they're all involved in characters. So by doing that, you meet, Old Noakes will teach you how to fish. And you'll soon get the measure of his extremely quirky mannerisms. And then you will meet Delphinium, who is probably the sweetest, nicest person in the entire game. But Delphinium, and she'll teach you about foraging. One of the moments I just absolutely adored it when I was when the game really started to come together is that Delphinium says, I'll show you where I can find some mushrooms. And then she lives in what is effectively, the hobbits call it a forest. It's really like a woodland thing.
Yeah.
She takes you through this forest. It's a very old forest. It's lovely and twisted and gnarly, and got lots of little nice views and vistas in it. But I'm just walking along behind this tiny hobbit, going across a fallen tree log across a river in the middle of a forest. And I thought, well, this is what I've come here for,
Yeah,
just doing this, And I think as a gamer as well, to gameplay, Bywater isn't a large amount of land, but because you're a hobbit and quite small, and because of the way that there's really no such thing as a straight line, everything twists and turns and comes around that. There's a lot to find and discover and explore there. So you can just spend a lot of time just going around and just exploring Bywater and just seeing what's there. As I say, there are different Easter eggs there. There's some Easter eggs there's peppered a lot of Easter eggs in the narrative.
Good.
They're not, you now get another chair for your room sort of Easter egg, but they're there for the people that know Tolkien.
Yeah.
They're just little kind of hand waves.
Oh, those are the things I'm really most excited for. Right.
Great. I'm really excited to see if somebody will come up with one. There's one there. I'm going to set it as a bit of a quiz. That one of the characters has got a toy, a particular toy, and that toy has a name, which they tell you, this character tells you, the name was given by Bilbo Baggins. Bilbo Baggins named the toy, and I'm really interested to see if people get what that is.
Right.
You're going to have to wait a few months now before you get that one, but yeah.
All right.
But it's just the thing. It's funny actually, because I thought it was quite, people get this one. Then actually some people who really do know Tolkien hadn't actually picked that one up. There's lots of those sorts of things there, but there's lots of visual treats there. And it's not just lore Easter eggs. It's also just, waterfalls and stepping stones and just beautiful views.
Yeah, I have a feeling this game is going to be the game that generates 1 million screenshots.
Oh, that's lovely.
From what I've seen, it's the art style is so just comfortable and and just the color palette, everything really is beautiful.
Well, this is really been really important to us. The visual here is how it looks so good, and the screenshots have been gorgeous. They've really showed off what we can do within there. The sort of the light coming through the trees. It is a painterly aesthetic.
That's a great word. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, that's exactly what it feels like.
Yeah.
Is there one location in particular that you're excited for people to be able to explore, whether from the books or new?
Probably a place that I've named Lookout Hill.
Okay.
Which, obviously there's a lot of blank spaces on the map. So whereas the Bywater Hobbits have a name for most things. I've tried to follow Tolkien's guide on this, that the hobbits just name things for what they
the
are.
Hill,
Yeah,
the water.
hill. Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. So I thought, well, there's more than one hill in our game, so I can't just keep calling them the hill, the other hill, and yet another hill. Although that would be quite funny, but
everything is that hill, this hill,
exactly.
the other hill.
Oh,
it's pretty much what it says on the tin. They don't get too creative with their names.
But there is an old lookout on top of an old lookout tower,
which then would go back to the thing we talked about earlier, the history of the land.
100%. Yeah,
and the fact that it was once Arthedain.
Yeah, exactly that. But the view from up there is gorgeous. You just get the whole spread of of Bywater.
Question for you, and this is something that's more it's a game question, it's a technical question. I've seen games that really do sort of play up their gorgeous nature and that really encourage things like screenshots, have features like a photo mode and the ability to change the time of day in the photo mode. So like you can be like, oh, this looks like a beautiful place, but here I am at noon. I want to go into photo mode and change this to sunset. Is that something that you all have incorporated in this game? I'm just curious, or if you can tell me.
We certainly have photo mode. We don't do adjustment on time.
Okay.
So photos can be taken, but we can't do the shifting in time.
Okay.
You need to go there at that time of day.
Yeah.
That's not a kind of an omission rather than a natural choice, actually, because we wanted the world to feel like the natural world.
Yeah. It goes on without you, whether you're doing anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Or not.
And the thing about hobbits, of course, they do live. I mean, not like, say, for instance, Laurie and Elle, to this incredible sympathy and integration with the energies of the Valar and nature. It's not like that, but they do live in great harmony with nature because, they sort of sit in that balance very, very carefully. And so trying to get that across is very good. I mean, but then, of course, against that, you're also battling, somebody go, I'd love to do this at sunset, but I've got to cook me dinner,
Right, exactly. I got somebody coming over. I got Rosie Cotton coming over.
Exactly, yeah.
I can't be here at
But
sunset.
in real life, they might be going, I've got to, I can't wait, I've got to, I'd love to have done that. No. So we're very aware that, you've got to get that balance right between what would be. Because
that is the kind of thing that can break immersion even in a photo mode. But it's for somebody like me who loves the visuals in a game, that would have been an interesting feature to look into. So we've talked a little bit about familiar places. We've talked a little bit about familiar people, like Sandyman, for instance, and Farmer Cotton. What about familiar events? We might not be here for Bilbo's famous birthday party, like you pointed out, but birthday parties in the Shire are a thing, as is the very unique tradition of gift giving. We've talked about making meals for people. Are we going to be seeing gift giving in the game? Are we handing around the same Matham over and over again? Especially, the reason I ask in particular is I just spent some time on today's Tolkien Times on Letter 214, which is the one where Tolkien spells out every last detail about gift giving etiquette in the Shire, down to the fact that you'd only expect a gift if you were a second cousin or nearer kin and lived within 12 miles. I mean, it's the kind of thing that would really be gamified in a way that would be really interesting. So is that something that you're able to or have chosen to incorporate or not? I'm just curious.
The short answer on that really is that we had a certain amount of, we had to prioritize what we could realize in the game. We had to give reality to that. And as you say, it is actually quite a system to be able to put in place. So we have the spirit of gift giving. We have the spirit of gift giving through the meal gifting.
Through the meals. Okay.
We looked long and hard at things like, do we introduce birthdays? And of course, hobbits give other people presents on their birthdays. You don't get them themselves.
Right. So you'd have to figure out, what present do I give to Rosie? What present?
We sort of start getting to that point. It's not going, this gets a bit more like a resource management game and not a cozy game. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, you're right. No, it almost becomes too complicated.
I've got 15 sort of major hobbits. So there's going to be, it's not every day is not the same as it is in the real world. Each season, it's like
accelerated time.
It's accelerated time. So some of that, so you don't have to wait a year of game time before you can actually harvest your potatoes.
Seriously,
it'd be like, please, So you kind of go, okay, that's a spring thing. Well, I'll play through winter. That will take me about an hour or so, and then I'll be. It was, it's those things we have to sort of get the mechanics to work. So the idea of kind of doing birthdays, and then you kind of go. When it's my birthday, I have to give
15 gifts to everybody.
15 gifts there to every to everything there. It starts becoming quite a resource management thing. We didn't want it to be like that. We wanted it to be something that you could enjoy the spirit of it rather than
so more relationship focused than mechanic focused.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, certainly if it comes to things that we've looked at, going, okay, well, so looking ahead, if we put some more, you get the opportunity to do some more with Tales of the Shire with this particular part of the Shire with Bywater. There's obviously these all areas that we'd love to be able to explore as well. With different timescales, which would be just wonderful to do. But for the game we have, we made the decision we want to go for. We felt that cooking was a really good thing to go for a couple of reasons.
Yeah.
One of which is because you don't just like finish cooking and then go up to Orlo or Delphinium or Farmer Cotton and say, I've cooked you a meal, and here it is.
Here's a stew.
Here's a stew. And then there's, achievement unlocked, stew to Farmer Cotton kind of pops up. We haven't gone down that path with it. So what we do is that we go, you actually, once you've chosen, you're also going to choose where you're going to give your meal. So you have a number of locations you can choose. You've got your own Hobbit hole, of course. There's also a lovely spot in the Green Dragon, which you can choose to have your meal at. There's another one over by the Three Farthing Stone, very al fresco with a beautiful view of the water and of the Bywater Village below it.
Oh, lovely.
So you can choose where you want to have there's Delphinium has got a lovely dining spot on top of her home. She actually lives inside an old trunk of a tree. So she's got like the top part of that is her garden, and you can. Now some of these that are unlocks, you need to build a relationship enough, as you would in real life. Hello, we just met. Can I use your roof for a party? But you can choose all those places there, and then when you do, and you serve the food, then there are actually cutscenes. It's short animation that actually show everybody sitting there eating together in the position where you've done. You serve up the food onto the table. You place the food on the table. And then you see the reactions of each Hobbit as they eat the food, whether they love it or they like it or they hate it or whatever. And then, and you see it within its setting as well. So we wanted to really show what an experience that was. Like really, really try and realize that experience as much as possible for players, to give it that warm feeling.
To make it more than just checking a box, to make the experience of eating the meal as important in the game as making the meal.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's a beautiful landscape, and the characters, you're getting more and more familiar with the characters, and you can see all that happening. So, exactly that. We wanted the experience to be as good as well as the achievement.
And it seems that really brings out the whole theme of fellowship and the other word besides fellowship that I've heard you mention a lot and on some of the videos as well is love as well. The heart of the game is love, I think you said in a recent video. What were some of the other Tolkienian themes that you were interested in making sure flowed through to the game, and how did you work on making sure that they did? Yeah,
obviously, as you say, the power of fellowship is really strong, really important. And that can't be underestimated, really. I mean, that's probably the real heart of the game. I mean, fellowship, love is the same thing, really. It's the same, especially if you're taking it, sort of the different, what we use in English as one word is actually got different words in other languages. And, like the sort of charity and, fraternal love and things like that, as well as romantic love, That's really, really strong, really important. I think nature, a love of nature. Appreciation of nature and awareness of nature, of living in nature and being part of that world is really important. Orlo in particular embodies, I think, the Sam Gamgee story arc. And I think that is hugely important as well. I mean, hobbits are cute, obviously. They're these small, tiny, friendly creatures. But at the same time, they are the true heroes of this world where even armies can't achieve what they managed to achieve. And that idea of that everybody has value, everybody has worth, everybody has a story. And I wanted every character to have a realistic, justifiable, and sympathetic reason for being the way they are, even the antagonistic characters,
Okay. Yeah.
They're not like mooks, or they're not there to be kind of knocked down without any sense, and they're just bad.
No, they're still hobbits.
They're still hobbits, Yeah, it was really important to me that they felt like real people. With that in mind, it really is a lot of the characters actually reflect people we know in our own lives or part of our family histories. There are many people I know who I've taken elements of them into life. Old Noakes is actually based strongly on somebody I know who, is an amazing cantankerous, but at the end of the day, incredibly loyal, decent human being, likewise, Delphinium is based on, actually met the real Delphinium, as it were, a couple of weeks ago. She's the cousin of one of our game designers.
Huh.
Her story, her relationship with her mother's ambitions and her own wishes, her own need to find her own way in life, is taken from her. I know that many of the artists that sometimes have actually been really emotional about certain characters because they are about people that they've had in their lives, or that they wish they'd had in their lives, or they've lost in their lives, and they've really put detailing in from that. And I think that that's all our jobs here. I'm the writer, but obviously there's all different jobs here. Our job is fundamentally to give people a great game that they really enjoy. That's our primary. We're not here to indulge ourselves. But at the same time, having that sense of deep emotional connection to those characters, where they really do reflect, real people in our lives that we feel a tremendous affection for, I think is something that's given a great richness and reality to that, and made those stories rather touching because there's a truth behind it, And I think that does link in to your question, really, about what are those sort of Tolkienian values. Because I think it is there in him, his humanity, his generosity, his kindness. I think his very childlike sense of fun. I mean, Tolkien has a very childish sense of fun, If you look at things like, people are always sort of surprised when it sort of said the people that he entrusted to put some of his work to music is Donald Swann from Flanders and Swann, because it's very kind of, Mud, glorious Mud, and nothing quite like it for fooling the blood. It's all kind of like quite light, You think he'd give it to some great composer of the day, something like that, or. But no, he just, I think Tolkien had that lightness to him. He had a Hobbit's sort of simplicity about him, which is incredibly at odds with what we now understand of the power of his imagination and the incredible richness that he delved into. There's all of that. So I really tried to capture that. I tried to capture. This is such a difficult question to answer, James. It's taken me a bit of time to get my wheels.
No, it's wonderful.
I'm starting to get there now. The other thing is really about, and again, I mean, to reference Michael Drout, but the idea of sort of like the depth of reading, the kind of great chain of reading, I think he calls it, where we really have these kind of documents and everything going back in time. That has been really important to me. In one point, the Hobbits quite literally end up with an ancient document but they don't realize it's an ancient document because they're hobbits. So that's.
Does it reveal what happened to the lost company of archers that they supposedly sent?
No, it doesn't.
To the great battle that
no, it doesn't.
Because I'm not sure they actually sent any archers.
Yes, the lost company of archers. I tell you, yeah. I do actually reference them.
Oh, do you? I can't wait. I can't wait to stumble across.
You have to find it. I
will. I'm looking forward to that.
There is a little mention to them. If you don't find it, let me know because I'll tell you where it is. But it's in one of the option choices by looking at a particular object and it references the lost company of archers. It's a good example of one of those Easter eggs we've been talking about. So very much that great chain of reading. Really wanted to have that sense of depth and history.
Yep. Yeah.
I felt that was really, really important. So that's why all that things like looking at the ancient history of Bywater and building out from there. Nora Burrows, who runs a shop, but she's a hobbit who loves stories and believes everything has a story, so she's really interested in the past. She often is a conduit for new information coming in, or for information about the wider Middle-earth, because one of the challenges, again, is you've got a Middle-earth game where you're playing a character surrounded by other characters who have no interest whatsoever in what's happening down the road, let alone in Rohan, So it's like trying to find a way to clue that in. And one of the things we've been able to do, which has been really lovely, actually, is that on occasions, there's the opportunity to go stargazing. Key characters with some of the NPCs, and they all have different ways of looking at the stars. But of course, you do get the stars, obviously hugely important within Tolkien's world and the Legendarium. So I was able to lean in all of those, and some of it was really referencing the way that stars and constellations are described in the Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
There is one conversation which really does lean into the story of Eärendil. Because we're allowed to do that because there is the poem. Eärendil was a mariner who tarried in Arvernian, built a boat of timber, felled a nimble to journey in, which is in Lord of the Rings. So it means that we can draw on that. We don't get into out of license Silmarillion material. So we reference Eärendil, but also just what stars mean. And that's another thing I've tried to do is to also go, what does it mean? What does. And obviously within Lord of the Rings, this is how this is what I teach really when I'm teaching Lord of the Rings. Whenever you're teaching doing these teaching things, you don't really need to tell people who people are. They know. I mean, they're
Yeah.
massively engaged. They're huge fans. So when you get to teaching people there, you'd no point saying, well, who was the steward of Gondor,
Yep.
But what you can do is talk about
Yeah.
what is good,
Mhm.
what is
Yeah.
power, what's the right use of power, is gold good? They're quite thought-provoking questions, and they lead to enormous discussions, great things. And I try and capture a sense of that as well. Try a tiny bit, because just that sense of kind of going, things sometimes have weight. Sometimes hobbits get an insight. I grew up in the countryside. I've spent a lot of time in taverns. So, it's as well as my Tolkien knowledge, I've also got this great knowledge of some of these real world situations. And sometimes the most beautiful and profound things can be said to you from people you just wouldn't expect them from,
Yep.
So I wanted to capture that as well. And then finally, also, as I said before, sometimes a slight sense of loss of things that were that aren't there anymore, of friends that were there that have gone now. Old Ruby is gone. You actually go into her house. But there are a few times that the people mention her and you hear what she did and how people talk about her. Sort of becomes something, she sort of become aware of her and got a sense of her. And I hope kind of go, she sounds like she was lovely. Sounds like somebody I really wish I could have met, And I mean, that's one example of those, just that sense of something that is, because, Tolkien's third age is greater than the fourth age. Second age was greater than the third, so powerful that characters like Aragorn and Theoden don't feel that they are just like lesser versions of greater size,
Yeah.
So powerful that, because of course they end up being the greatest of all of them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, there's one of the most moving pieces in Lord of the Rings is Theoden before the walls of Minas Tirith, the Pelennor Fields, collapsing in despair and then suddenly rising up in his spirit. I mean, my God, I'm getting moved thinking about it now, I mean, so powerful. And just to get a sense that that's the world that Tolkien created, and Tales of the Shire sits in that world, and that we can believe it's part of that world. That's been what I've hoped to do.
Well, one other way that Tolkien's made sure to tie his world together is the incredible use of language, specifically the constructed languages like Quenya and Sindarin. Hobbits are not known for speaking Elvish tongues, so I'm not expecting to hear Quenya songs or anything like that. But the Hobbits' language has some things in common with the language of Rohan. Tolkien even pointed out in Appendix F that when hobbits heard the speech of Rohan, they recognized many words and felt the language to be akin to their own. I'm thinking of the word Matham, for instance, which is straight out of Old English. That's why Rohirric is represented by Old English in Tolkien. Now, are there any nods at all to the linguistic roots of the hobbits? And if so, how did you incorporate them?
What a great question. One of the things we experimented in was seeing whether we could actually have the hobbits speaking Westron.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which would have been, because it would sound a little bit like Simlish, So we did actually spend some time doing that, but there just wasn't enough. It really wasn't enough there to go,
No, it would have to be written stuff, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I mean, yes, we could have, we could have spent that, but probably have to. I think the idea of, say, cutting the cooking in favor of having Westron probably wouldn't have been the right decision to do.
Wrong game.
I was going to say, take the game right out of the game and turn it into just a documentary.
Diehard Tolkien fans would never have anything bad to say about us.
Exactly.
But,
You'd sell 17 copies. I'd buy 2 of them. But
Exactly. Yeah. No, we did look at that. I mean, the linguistic. Well, really, I suppose linguistically. As I say, I tried to capture how Tolkien wrote, and also the sort of the colloquialisms of the hobbits and the regionalisms of the hobbits as well, and their phraseology. So I really tried to capture that as it's expressed in the books, and also their sort of social status, as it were.
Yes.
So Orlo is a plain talking, he's sort of has a great kind of character progression, but he's basically more like a Sam kind of character. And I wrote him with that kind of West Country voice. And it's part of the country I went from. Sam Gamgee sounds like half the kids I went to school with. And then other characters like Nora, who's basically educated, a book hobbit, would actually have used bigger words. Her brother, Fosco, was very much inspired by William Morris, actually. His values. He actually sort of paraphrases Morris at one point, and that again is one of those Easter eggs that's so niche. It's like nobody really get it. It's going William Morris is a major influence on Tolkien, House of the Wolfings, all that stuff,
Right.
Yep.
As well as the Pre-Raphaelite movement and everything. So Morris felt like the sort of more aesthetic Hobbit would actually have William Morris values.
Yeah.
But he probably has the
love
most developed vocabulary. So they do all talk in different ways. And I mean, when you were talking about Rohan, I mean, it's one of my favorite made me laugh out loud when I realized when they found the difference between the Rohan Westron and the Hobbit's Westron is the connection between Kuduk and Rohirric. And there's that wonderful thing that the Hobbits don't have a formal, now I'm not a linguist, but a formal way of expressing. They don't have a formal
the second person pronoun, the thou, thee,
thou, thee
versus
thing.
you.
Yeah.
They only have the informal. So when Pippin starts speaking to Denethor using the informal, people are like, he must be of royalty.
Exactly.
That's the line.
And Theoden finds it so endearing,
He does.
He basically sits down and goes, "Hello, mate."
Exactly.
And then the king's like, "Wait a minute, normal people don't talk to me
like that."
Yeah.
I just thought that was
so
just
great.
It's a wonderful thing. Some of the. I mean, you kind of go, yeah. There's a very funny joke at the end of a long road you have to go down. But when you get it is actually really funny.
It really is, and that's the thing that Tolkien did is fill his works with that sort of, the reward for going down those rabbit holes.
Absolutely.
Well, I love the fact you talked about the different characters depending on sort of their social class speaking differently, because this is again something that Tolkien did really well. You mentioned at the start about the contractions, right? The your versus you are and so on. One of the things that I did, I recently did a master's degree. My dissertation was on Tolkien's linguistic variation.
Wonderful.
So one of the things I looked at was the way that different characters spoke. And it's amazing the extent to which Tolkien had different characters doing things like whether they contracted their words or not. So Sam always says don't. He never says do not. The only hobbits that say do not are Frodo and Merry. All the other hobbits contract to don't. That kind of detail. And I love hearing that you're that's the kind of thing you
very mindful of it. Yeah. Well, that's great. And now all I want to do is read your dissertation. That sounds I'd really love to read it. It sounds fascinating. Yeah. What a great thing.
Well, you'll definitely have to listen to the show because when he comes on, we're going to be doing episodes on like Appendix
on
F.
the appendices. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to be diving into the languages.
Yeah, really, really great. So it's all those influences. I mean, I hope that answers your question actually, just because that was quite an interesting one about going, I mean, it's to say, how does Tolkien's world influence the game is, you sort of wanted to give quite a full answer to that because, there are different levels to it. I mean, just the only thing I would say to perhaps to reassure people is that, this isn't a kind of a history lesson in Tolkien. It's not it's hopefully it provokes interest. It's a game, but at the same time, I mean, this is Tolkien's thing, wasn't it? That he maintained, I mean, he was responsible. He's quite unpopular in some areas of Oxford, not for Lord of the Rings, but because he insisted that any student of English literature in Oxford needs to study Anglo-Saxon. And it was called the Anglo-Saxon
the
wedge.
Lang debate.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
And he was, of course, very strong about going, you really do need to know Anglo-Saxon. And it's still a matter of contention because they still do teach Anglo-Saxon, in Oxford for literature students. His contention is that you don't need to know what a word means to get beauty and power from it, to get its beauty and its power. And that you don't need to be able to speak a language to be able to appreciate how that language is hanging together. Lord of the Rings is the most amazing demonstration of that. We don't need to know that Gon means stone.
Right.
But Gondor, Argonath, Gondolin, all of the, it just has that. It's the most powerful way he could argue that, that those words have all that meaning. So, yes, I also wanted that. I was very careful about that and quite hawkish. I made a rod for my own back, really, because, other people were also contributing, as writers, as part of the writing team.
Yep.
But I spent a lot of time going, no, And of course, because it's rather difficult because we're in New Zealand and there's a lot of New Zealanders here and some Australians worked on this game as well, as writers and that. And as I say, our vocabulary has changed. Yeah. And as I was sort of saying earlier on, I don't think Tolkien would have had a problem with that. He was an expert in linguistic change. Like that was his thing. And beyond that, upon the changing culture and a deep understanding of how culture changes as well. So within his own lifetime, when people were doing some crazy attempts to adapt Lord of the Rings for film and radio and everything else like that, and they he was never really on board with the Beatles playing,
Stanley Kubrick directing the Beatles.
John Lennon as Gollum, yes.
I mean, that was clearly never really a particular thing. It's a funny thing about the Beatles, though, because, they once do like the end of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Like, quite a lot of it. Like, in shape with Bottom and, like, it's incredible. It's on his TV show. They just do Midsummer Night's Dream. It's the same, I think Peter Sellers does his Laurence Olivier impersonation of doing Richard III, doing A Hard Day's Night in the style of Richard. It's all on the same TV program. But
Wow.
I really do digress there. But yeah, the Beatles doing Lord. I mean, like, he obviously wasn't on board with those. But I think also if somebody had said to him, I think by the end, towards the end of his life, I think he got an understanding about just how successful it all was. That it was going to live beyond him. If somebody had said to him, well, in 2025, we're going to get people talking in technology that would amaze you, that we now just take for granted, that we'd be talking about your work in all of this depth and everything else like that. And we have also we've added characters, we put in changes and things like that. Then I think he'd understand that. I think he'd, quite probably appreciate it, actually. I don't know, but there would certainly be an argument to be put to him of going that any great myth and story goes through interpretations. Yeah. King Arthur. How many different versions of King Arthur have there been? Robin Hood. How many Errol Flynn to Kevin Costner to Taron Egerton, I mean, like, how many different versions of those are there?
Yeah.
Even Sherlock Holmes, If it's a great story, it will be retold.
Yeah.
And it won't be reproduced. It's not a facsimile reproduction. It will be retold. And the tale will grow in the telling.
Yes. Yes, it will.
And so, to try and expand out and add more. Because, if you really are an enthusiast of the Shire, there's not actually very much of it. One of Tolkien's enormous achievements is to make the Shire feel so personal and important to us. I mean, it's why we care. Yeah. It's the damsel in distress in the story, isn't it? Is the Shire, It makes us care deeply. And, it's so sad when the party tree, Sam comes and finds the party tree cut down, and he says nothing hurt him as much. Everything he'd seen, as this.
Because that's how it comes home, right? I mean, that's thing.
How it comes
he talks
home.
About that.
And we find that sad because we now deeply empathize with Sam. We understand his world, and we love the Shire too. Yeah. I mean, our biggest tourist attraction here in New Zealand, I mean, a marvelous country with incredible landscape. Our biggest tourist attraction here is Hobbiton. The Hobbiton film set, And people come there who don't even know anything about Lord of the Rings. But they just know they're coming there, maybe because they're a relative or whatever, of people that are going, they come there and they go, this is just absolutely brilliant. And I find it stunning that people can go to someone like the Hobbiton film set with no knowledge whatsoever of Lord of the Rings, or only like the most passing ambient cultural awareness of it, and come away going, this was just the most gorgeous place to go. Now, isn't that incredible that can be captured, that the Shire can be made and created?
Yeah. That actually leads nicely into the next question, which is, and we've touched on this a little bit, that the sort of the fact that there's two audiences to this game. There's the general gaming audience and there's the Tolkien audience. To what extent do you think those two audiences differ, and how have you worked to try to please both?
For one thing, really trying to make the experience cozy, whether or not you are going to enjoy it, whatever. Keeping that coziness in mind as much as we possibly can. But there are some areas where we need to effectively create a game rather than an experience. There needs to be a sense of, there's all different factors coming to this, but one of it is obviously getting very good at something, getting very good at foraging, or getting very good at cooking a particular meal, things like that. But we try and keep it within those parameters. But there are various motivations like that when it comes to games. That they want to be able to do those things. A lot of gamers won't want to be bothered with anything of the stuff I've done. They won't want to be there talking to hobbits and everything else like that. And if they realize they have to sort of go through it because they want to achieve something, and if they do, they need to get their relationship up to a certain level, they can't really do that. Or the quickest way to do that is to do this particular thing, and then maybe Farmer Cotton or young Tom Cotton will think highly of you. They'll do it, but they'll kind of skip through the dialogue to get to the bit.
Tap.
Absolutely, yeah. And that is fine.
Yeah,
that's fine. As long as they're enjoying themselves, they can do what they want with it.
Right.
So that's been the challenge, is to do that there. But we need to keep sight of the cozy game thing. But this is what's so good about it being a cozy game, is that the cozy game and the Shire are just perfect bedfellows, really. I mean, it's like the perfect place for it. So there is that there, As far as how much actual kind of pure Tolkien, as it were, is being put into the world there, I mean, in some ways, maybe I'm the wrong person to ask about this, because I truly believe in the intrinsic value of Tolkien's work, Tolkien's writings, Tolkien's values, and what he espoused. I think if we were more, well, to use the quote at the end of The Hobbit, if more people
I was going to say,
fellowship
Thorin's
rather than
words
hoarded
come to
gold,
mind,
the world would be a kinder place. It would
Yes,
be,
it would.
and to give a chance to, I think those values still resonate with people. And there are plenty of people that read those words and feel really moved by them and then go around hoarding gold. I mean, it's not, it's clearly not, it's not working. It's one thing I'd probably say. But at the same time, those values are there. And I think if those values, I think also are the sort of values that are lovely to see in a cozy game.
Yeah.
So I feel no sense that it's wrong to really try and express something that's true to Tolkien's vision. And then, a bit like I was saying about language and about, that you don't need to understand language to get a sense of its beauty and its consistency. People don't need to know what that funny inscription is or that funny picture that's be carved on an old piece of rock means. They don't need to know that. They don't need to know anything about the 3 farthing stone other than the fact it's a place where they can have a nice meal. They don't need to know. They don't even know why it's called the 3 farthing. Why that is in itself slightly a linguistic joke, because it's 3 farthing, right? But yeah, all the they don't need to know that, but other people will. Other people will know this is where Sam Gamgee will stand one day, and he will throw the dust from the woods of Lorien and the Shire. Yeah, I mean, that was something, and I think from that point of view as well, that was one of the moments. It's a good example actually of some time when I steered the characters away from sort of what. If it wasn't set in the Shire, if we weren't talking about this time, that the characters quite naturally would have progressed to doing. I wanted to preserve that, which I think is the right thing to do. But, there's certain things, I'm being cryptic because obviously I want people to discover this themselves. But certain kind of characters' progressions, they're going to be obviously going to become really good at that and go, but they're alive at the same time as Sam, unless they're one of the unfortunate hobbits who doesn't get through the Battle of Bywater, but they're the same. They're going to be there with Sam. I need to keep that. That needs to be. We can't say, and the Shire's restored through the magic of the elves, but also because they'd had, they'd managed to find their true destiny and became really good at gardening. It's like there's something there that needs to be kept, which is that sense. I mean, it is very beautiful, the idea of something that is so almost divine, certainly beyond our own life, as the power of the elves, that incredible power that they have, that it actually comes back literally to the food we eat and the flowers we see. We can get that as well, and that whole great beauty comes down again. So in those areas I've wanted to try and keep those things fairly, to preserve those things, even if they're only in anticipation. But by the same token, if you look around, there are some high banked ditches. The road does go through some high banked ditches in Bywater. And if you wanted to take As it should, right? And if you wanted to go, but how would they do the Battle of Bywater? Where was Farmer Cotton standing?
Where would we have that upturned cart?
Yes, exactly, And we do actually have an upturned, well, we don't have an upturned, we have a broken down cart at one point, but it may or may not be the thing. But I think it's just really about reality, I mean, like he created such an incredible world that feels so real for so many people. I mean, his first great fan was his own son, who has done an absolutely extraordinary job of giving us his father's legacy. I mean, I've only really started to become truly appreciate how important Christopher Tolkien is to the story of Tolkien, and to us and to whatever happens now moving forward. An incredible thing, and it all hangs there. It felt, as he said to him, Gondolin felt more real to him than somewhere like Babylon. It feels real to me. It does feel like a place I know.
It does. There's no doubt about that.
Exactly. So if that's the case, then it can feel like that. It's felt like that to me since I first read it when I was 15 years old, when I didn't know what I was going to be in my life. But the last thing I ever imagined I'd be doing is sitting in New Zealand, talking to you guys in America, writing a video game. That's my job, you know what I mean? I never ever imagined that would be possible. But in those distant days, that place was Middle Earth, was so real to me. And my imagination would just take me around. I just find myself looking in Edoras, or, you know, standing, you know, on a ship leaving the Grey Havens. You know, they were very real to me. And I think that that is what we want this game to feel like. It's a really lofty aspiration, but
is.
nothing is achieved without being like aiming for the best you possibly can, and that's what we've tried to do here. So,
well, speaking of that, actually, let's be honest here. Tales of the Shire has had a couple of release dates. In a recent video, Richard Taylor himself said something along the lines of what you just said. He said, "We don't want to fall short of the expectation we have on ourselves."
Yeah.
Given this extra development time, what are a couple of the things that you personally have been able to add or improve in the game now that it has been delayed?
Yeah, it's actually it really is about making the experience for the players as everything you want it to be across the different platforms. So it is something where we go, we've created the game. We would of course love to keep working on the game because it's there's always things you want to do. There's always new discoveries, new thoughts, new think, I feel like we just done that, that would have been wonderful. But actually, pragmatically, there is a point where we've had to stop working on it so that it can be made as good as it can be. And now we're looking at, we know there's very different types of platforms, different types of spaces. We want every player on all of those platforms to get the very best experience they can, and that is, it's very challenging technically, not always achievable for companies, but it's something that's very important to us as a company that we should do that. So that's what the delay has been about.
Great.
And what's been really lovely actually is that, we've seen the responses from people. People have been really kind about it. We were kind of going, people aren't going to like this, and they've just gone, look, just get it right,
That's the thing. Delays can mean so many different things to gamers. We look at a game that's delayed and we think, oh, it's awful. It's going to be awful. And they're just delaying the awful. But other times you get the sense that, okay, they know they can fix things. They know they can make it better. And they want to avoid maybe some recent example of a poor game. I don't want to throw developers under the bus, but the most recent Middle-earth game that came out was a bit of a shambles. The Gollum game. I mean, it ended up resulting in the unfortunate studio no longer even being a studio. Clearly, you don't want to follow that example. And so I think gamers in the Middle-earth world are like, hey, look, they're just working hard to make sure they don't end up putting out something that is subpar. And Wētā doesn't do subpar.
No.
So I feel like there's that too. Like Wētā is, you all have set the bar so high with everything else that you do that you're not going to accept a game that comes out that's just kind of meh.
Thank you for answering my question. Actually, that's really good. I'm
just speaking as a gamer, right? Especially as a Middle-earth gamer I've been playing, because I've been in Middle-earth probably about as long as you, since I was about 13, 14 years old. I get the feeling we're men of a certain generation. And, I've been playing video games as well for a very long time. I have a lifetime VIP subscription to Lord of the Rings Online because I bought that when the game was out, when it first launched. And so, exactly. So playing Middle-earth is something I've been doing for, decades. So I look at a project like yours and I think, okay, they read the tea leaves. They see what's happened in the industry. They're working on making this a better game. So I'm excited by the delay because it tells me you've got time to make it better, to give a better experience. But to hear you tell me, okay, it's very specifically that cross-platform challenge, which is incredibly technically difficult. And, to be able to give people, on a cutting edge PC with a 50 series, NVIDIA card, but also still be able to give somebody on the Nintendo Switch a really high quality experience. Those are so radically different platforms that, it's going to be a technical challenge. So I'm all for it. I'm glad that you guys are doing that because it's going to make the experience
glad
better.
we're taking the time to do it. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly it. Yeah. And, and I mean, also, I've worked in the film industry. I used to be an actor, as I was saying. I've also worked in film and made films and things like that. And you realize also is that, that I really appreciate all the different Middle-earth games that have come out. I appreciate the fact that people are trying to extend the world. Not everything's going to land right with people. Yeah. And also not everything's going to land right with the people that are making it. There can be some amazing complications that they've never anticipated. Some of those, and in the challenges of the real world, it can come down to people, it can come down to technology, it can come down to external forces on a company. There's all sorts of reasons why things may not land in the way that people hope. But what I really have appreciated is that it's a great a great opportunity to think about, what Gollum's up to, or what happened with the dwarves when they want to go back in and recolonize Moria and everything else like that. And just that excitement that there's so much exploration of the world,
Yes.
And also I think respect for the world as well. I've not, there's one of the things I could never say about, when I see these games, you can never say they don't kind of want it to feel like proper Tolkien. They're not.
No, they do.
Disrespecting
even the games
IP,
that have not succeeded, you talk to the people, they clearly have a passion for it. Like you said,
they
external
do,
forces or whatever it may be.
Yeah, exactly. And they put it out there, and the market decided,
That's what it does.
And it does, and that's what it does. But I just love the fact that there's so many different projects going out. There's already been some great games, of course, Middle Earth games, but and I mean, Lotro is a great example of that. But of experiences and that. But so it's great that we're able to do this, and we're able to allow people to keep exploring the world. And I really do hope that people, to me, yes, I'm very much looking forward to my tribe of Tolkien enthusiasts acknowledging and appreciating and enjoying what we've put into the game, that would show a deep understanding. But, it's the people that kind of go, after playing this game, I now want to watch the Lord of the Rings film.
Yeah.
As you say, we're of a certain age, so it's rather terrifying that anybody under the age of 21 wasn't born when Fellowship came out in the theatres.
No. Curse you and your sudden but inevitable betrayal. How could you say such a thing? Yeah, you're right. But it's a reminder of what we talked about earlier, that people will come to Tolkien and the books through so many different media. And in this case, it's just another door. It's another way for people to get into Tolkien, and I'm excited that people will.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so Tales of the Shire releases later this week. What's the highest praise that you hope to hear from Tolkien's fans about the game over the coming weeks? What would really make you happy to hear?
Great question. A couple, I suppose. One of which is that it's made me want to find out more about Tolkien.
Yep,
good.
That would be wonderful. One would be, it feels like it was written by Tolkien.
Wouldn't that be great?
Wouldn't that be great? I don't think I'm going to get that one. But the other thing I just want people to say, it made me happy. It made me smile. It made me laugh. It made me feel really good playing it. I think if I do that, we do that. It's not me. It's like a whole studio of people. I've just had a very small part to play, But at the same time, if we managed to do that, we gave people joy and happiness. This game was conceived in those days of COVID, when we really saw the value of celebrating these simple pleasures, and to return to that now. If we can do that, then I think that really is what we aimed to do, and that is probably the best way we can honor Tolkien's legacy.
I love that.
Wonderful.
Well, Darren, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
A real pleasure.
We're looking forward to maybe having you come back on in a year or two when the first expansion packs hit the shelves, or the sequel gets ready to go.
Yeah, give me a shout.
We're going to have you back. For now, though, folks, that wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. And for season 9 of the show, the PPP will be on hiatus through August and the first 2 weeks of September. But we will launch season 10 on September 21st as we celebrate Hobbit Day.
Bilbo and Frodo's birthday is actually the 22nd, of course, but what's a day between friends? Folks, Alan and I want to thank the members of Team PPP, editor Jordan Rennells, Barliman Becca Davis, social media manager Casey Hilsey, event and Patreon community coordinator Katie McKenna, graphic artist Megan Collins, and website guru Phil Dean.
And please take a minute to check out the prancingponypodcast.com. That's where you'll find our show notes, outtakes, Prancing Pony Ponderings, and our online storefront where you can get PPP merch featuring all the great episode artwork that Megan's been doing for the show since the start of Season 7.
You'll also want to visit our library page. The Prancing Pony Podcast is first and foremost a podcast about the books. So if you're interested in a book we've mentioned on the show, you'll find a link for it in our library. The PPP gets a small amount of compensation when you make a purchase, and we thank you for that.
Indeed, we do. And we also want to thank our patrons at the Kierdan's contribution tier. I'll start with DeMay in Alaska, Chad in Texas, Lance in New Jersey, Joseph in Michigan, Kathy from North Carolina, Carlos in California, Brian in the UK, Jerry from Washington, Joe in Washington, Erwin from the Netherlands, Ben in Minnesota, Anthony in Texas, Zaksu in Illinois, Sarah in New Jersey, Joshua in Massachusetts, Lucy in Texas, Keith in Alabama, Erica in Texas, and Vivian in California.
There's also James in Massachusetts, Anne in Kentucky, Sean in New Jersey, Mason in California, Maureen from Massachusetts, Olivia in London, Robert in Arizona, Nick in Wisconsin, Lewis in South Carolina, Thomas in Germany, Craig in California, Bailey in Texas, Kevin in Massachusetts, Julie in Washington, Bruce in California, Joe in Maryland, Nathan in Arizona, and Kevin in Pennsylvania. Thank you all so very much for your support.
Indeed, thank you.
Make sure you don't miss any episodes of the Prancing Pony podcast. Subscribe now through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or your favorite podcast app.
And one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your thoughts, comments, and most of all, your opinion of Wētā Workshop's Tales of the Shire game to barliman@theprancingponypodcast.com.
And if you want your voice literally heard, well, just send us an audio of your question. Visit podinbox.com/prancingponypod and record your question for us. Be sure to still email the question to Barliman, though.
Indeed. Now, even though Barliman's been a lot more reliable lately, there's still a lot of mail to sort through. We'll try to get to you just as soon as we're able. As always, though, this has been far too short a time to spend amongst such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time,
may you rekindle hearts in a world that grows chill.